Okay, welcome everyone to Inside the Birds TV with Jeff Mosher and Adam Kaplan. And we are really excited and very thankful to have our next guest. He is from the Philadelphia suburbs. He is a former Eagles scouting department member, and he just happens to be a Super Bowl champion general manager. Really excited to have Chiefs general manager Brett Veach on with us today. Brett, can't thank you enough for coming on, and a long overdue congratulations from myself and from Adam on winning the Super Bowl. I'm sure just the sound of that. I know the 2020 season's underway, Brett, but I'm sure that still sounds pretty good, right?
Well, certainly it sounds good and never gets old, and certainly excited to join you guys today. I know we wanted to catch up over at the Combine and after the Super Bowl, and certainly things have gone in a different direction, but happy to catch up with you guys today and talk some football.
Yeah, well, I know I have to square up with you on a certain topic, which I will certainly do. I'll give you the mea culpa in 1 second, and I think you know where we're going with this. But first, I want to tell our listeners to download the top-rated DraftKings Sportsbook app today and use code ITB for a special offer when you sign up. That's code ITB for a special offer when you sign up at DraftKings Sportsbook. All right, I'm going to get right to it, Brett, because like I said, I got to square up with you. It was a couple of years ago when Patrick Mahomes was a rookie, and he did mostly, was on the bench behind Alex Smith. And Deshaun Watson's out there slinging touchdowns, setting records. And I may have casually said to you at one point, are you sure you made the right decision on the quarterback, trading up to get the right guy? And you just said, yeah, I'm still sure. And here we are all these years later, and Patrick Mahomes has won you a Super Bowl. Almost two, really, to be honest with you. 2 years ago, you never know what happens if they get the ball first, if he gets the ball first in overtime against New England. But I got to say, mea culpa, awesome job by you, and it must be very validating to have Patrick Mahomes.
Well, look, I mean, gave you a year to change your mind. I don't know if you saw the McCall Hardman Tyreek Hill race where Tyreek just closed at the end there. So you got out to a nice little lead there, and then we closed it. Look, I mean, obviously Deshaun Watson's a great player, but from the time we started with Pat, we knew we had something special. We knew we had a great situation for him with Alex Smith being here and Coach Reid laying out a blueprint for getting this kid up to speed, and the talent was there. And, we're certainly excited that it worked out the way it has, and it'll be a good rivalry between Pat and Deshaun, and shoot, look no further than the opening game of this year. We get to do another round with those two great players, and we're excited for the season to start and excited to face off against Houston Texans for sure.
Brett, so on Mahomes, now let's go back to his college tape. I could tell you, talk from coordinators and quarterback coaches, they thought mechanics need to be cleaned up. He was real raw. You heard this one. Everyone's heard this one. Oh, boy, I don't know if this Texas Tech offense transfers to the next level. So it's not a secret. You were very bullish personally on him. Of course, John Dorsey and Andy Reid were. But what did you see that said, okay, down the road, this kid could be super special?
Well, in this league, certainly the athletes on both sides of the ball, in particular the defensive line, it doesn't really allow for some of the college throws that you see where you get clean pockets, and depending on who you're playing in the level of competition week in and week out, on Sunday every week, defensive fronts are athletic, they're creative, they get after the quarterback. So amongst a multitude of things, I think the one thing just from a physical standpoint, certainly he has an arm and he's athletic, but his ability to throw off platform in this league is really something that you'll look for, because you know that it's not always going to be a clean pocket, and you're going to have to go against some talented defensive ends and interior defensive linemen. So I think when you just watch Pat, you saw him play under duress. You saw him always keep his that calm demeanor that he plays with, that swagger he plays with. So he was able to do that at the college level consistently, and he certainly knew that there's things that he had to clean up, but put him in here under Coach Reid and let him go to work and see what happens. And again, so far so good.
How do you guys balance, especially early on, and really the coaching staff and everybody, some of the things that Patrick does that a lot of coaches would have been originally like, no, okay, fine. He's such a Brett Favre-like kind of quarterback who can turn something or nothing into something. Was that something that you guys were like, he's going to do that, you have to let Patrick be Patrick? Or was this something that, you coached, you had Andy Reid really work with him on?
Well, that was the value of the first year, getting to sit and watch and learn and study. That's where the value really came in. He found himself obviously in college to be down a lot, and I think he felt the weight of the world on his shoulders in regards to having to score every single time he touched the ball. Certainly at our level, it's situational football. It's understanding check downs are okay, live to play the next down, and he got a tutorial in that year one in regards to just learning how to play the game and learning how to win the down, and knowing that the defense, you got to put some trust in the defense to get the football back, and just a strategy of the game. I think one thing though that gets lost in the shuffle with Pat, because he's such a talented player, and you see these wow throws and these highlight throws. I think the one big thing that gets lost with Pat Mahomes is just how smart he is. I mean, this is an extremely smart individual, and he understands the game. He has rare instincts, but he loves the studying of the game aspect. He loves breaking down opponents, and I think you saw the one clip he did outside of the building in regards to just wanting to get to that Coach Reid level and understanding what defenses are thinking and how they're processing it. So sometimes we just get in that mindset where he is a gunslinger and he has talent around him, but we lose sight of the fact of how smart he is and how much of a student of the game he strives to be.
Brett, with what we've had this offseason, rookies did get on the field. They're not going to have a preseason. So how much realistically could we see or should we see rookies, especially early on the season, being a factor?
Well, it's a great question, and I think it's all dependent on the situation, where these guys come in regards to how quickly they can adapt. And as mentioned, Adam, it's a feeling out process where having that OTA and rookie minicamp, it allows for these guys to start to assimilate into the playbook and the building, and you get a good feel for it. Now we've had a bunch of Zoom meetings, and we have a rough idea of where guys are and how quickly they can learn. But there's certainly a distinction between how quickly they learn on Zoom meetings and Zoom tests to actual when the bullets are flying live and guys are flying around, and then with no preseason game too. And we'll certainly have scrimmages. I think a lot of it will be could be need dependent if you just have to play them, and it also could be just how quickly they adapt and grow into the system. So I think it'll just depend on how these guys have taken to the playbook and what kind of background they come from. Obviously, some guys, bigger schools and playing at the LSUs and Alabamas, and will probably be the head of the learning curve. Where some of the small school guys, developmental players, it could be a little bit longer than typical. But I think it's going to be fascinating from a scouting standpoint, just because we talk about it all the time. Mm-hmm. The thing that's really going to change is, you guys know this because you guys watch a ton of football, but just the amount of preseason games that all these teams spend watching. Just a couple of years ago, we spent a ton of time watching a defensive back, Shavarius Word, and it was preseason game that really allowed us to, work a trade out with Dallas to get him, and had that been this year, he wouldn't be on our roster. So that will be an interesting dynamic. And also, too, when you think about all these teams cutting their rosters from 90 to 80, before they really even put the pads on and do anything, you're talking 10 players each team, 32 teams. There's 300 players on the street right now that 32 teams thought were good enough to compete at training camp. So there are going to be players from that lot that end up starting on teams and, doing great things. So it's going to be a daunting task to make sure that our board is updated. And I almost feel like as we go through training camp, we're actually going to be in our draft room watching draft tape from last year again, because there's going to be a lot of players that are on the street and have been on the street, right, for a few weeks. So we'll be watching last year's college tape again, just to try to prioritize a list of players at certain positions, depending on how camp goes without the 4 players.
Does that mean, Brett, that you guys are, and should we anticipate that scouts, personnel people are working differently and maybe in some cases a little bit harder than normal because of the circumstances presented by the new CBA and the protocols?
Well, look, my certainly very fortunate to work with a great staff, and our staff always does a great job of turning through tape all times of the year. But I think it's just adapting. It's like the coaches have to do, like the players have to do, shoot, like we have to do in life. I mean, it's just the ability to adapt and adjust. So typically right now, I mean, I think we should have been on a plane to Arizona to get ready for our first preseason game, but we're not, and there's no pro games to watch. So, but we also realize that because there's no preseason games, and just because there's no because there's no preseason games to watch doesn't mean it just ends. I mean, it doesn't mean the injuries will end, and the ability to supplement your roster is going to end. There's still going to be that need to supplement your roster, to find players, to get to the end of camp, and to have a practice squad. You'd like to think that your roster has most of those guys now, but things are going to happen in the next month that you're going to need to be prepared for. So I think just being able to stay on top of that and keep your emergency board intact and updated, and continue to just review and keep open all possibilities to add player will be a difficult task, but I think it's just a matter of adapting and adjusting.
So, Brent, speaking of adapting and adjusting, we now have so many college conferences canceling football. So how does that impact scouting for next year in terms of gathering information? I don't know how you go into schools if they're not having football. So when you look at college football this season and what it looks like won't be happening, how are you going to get that information?
Well, I mean, you certainly have to rely on the context that you have in schools. I'm sure there'll be, for the schools, the Big Ten and the Pac-10, the ability to have Zoom conferences. It'll be a little adaptation of what we did once the combine ended, when there was a bunch of small schools that we needed more information on. We didn't have test numbers on, so we had to rely on our contact information there, and we had to rely on a bunch of Zoom calls, interactions. So there'll certainly be kind of a hybrid of the Zoom meetings that we got used to during the draft process, and both with the players, the school contact information, and then it'll be a very different dynamic. I think once we get into the spring, hopefully things clear up. Again, don't have a crystal ball, but I know we're all hoping and praying that things clear up. And if they do, I certainly think the pro days and the combines are going to take on a new life, and they're going to be, I think you're going to see typically schools that pro days weren't big deals and only a few scouts. I think you'll probably see capacity crowds at all these schools just to make sure they get updated numbers and information. So I certainly think that the spring will be a very busy time for the entire league.
Brett, I want to get into your time with the Chiefs here and working your way up, and the identity that the scouting department has developed since Andy Reid came over there. Several of your best players are not first-round picks. Chris Jones, Travis Kelce, McCole Hardman, Damian Williams. So can you talk about what it is as a without giving away the notebook, but as a philosophy when you go into the draft every year? What are you looking for it to be a Chief?
Well, I think that would probably be something that would be similar throughout the league in regards to everyone's looking for good players that are good teammates. And I think it's more of a process thing for us and how we go about it. And certainly when I got here, John Dorsey kind of introduced us to the two things. Certainly the pre-combine meetings where we literally go in there and watch almost every player on our board, and by the time we get to the draft, feel like we've seen 10 games on almost every prospect on our board. So I think exhausting the tape and the capacity in which we do, and then also John did a good job of really cross-training all of our scouts. So our process and our philosophy, I know we have college scouts and we have pro scouts, but we certainly ask our pro scouts to do college tape during the year, and we ask our college guys to do pro tape during the year. It gives them really a better understanding of the league, where you can find value, and then just exhausting the tape. And that model that we use for the college draft and exhausting the tape on every player, we carry that over to cut down days, and we carry it over to our free agency tape in the fall. So it's the same process over and over and over, and it's like anything in life. If you keep doing things repetitively over and over and over, you become good at it. And I think our staff has done that, and we got continuity with our staff. So I think the process, the cross training, and that's just the continuity that we have has enabled us to really find players early on in the draft, late in the draft, waiver wires throughout the season, practice squad, and I think those are probably a few of the things that have helped us be successful early on, and then maintain that success the entire run here. The coaches have been here.
Brett, so let's get to your draft this year. Obviously, you drafted Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and you mentioned LSU. So how much did drafting Clyde have to do with the system that he played in LSU? And Do you see him as a 3-down back? Do you see him being a big factor early? Because as we said earlier, no offseason, no preseason. Kind of bring us up to date where you see him going.
Yeah, no, we're excited about Clyde, and I know it's been talked a lot about, especially you guys can relate because of the comparisons to Brian Westbrook, and I think that got taken the wrong way. I think I called Brian afterwards. I said, you do realize that typically teams don't take running backs in the first round. So I told Brian, I said, if I'm comparing him to anybody, I got to compare him to someone, on that level. I can't just say he reminds me of a third down back somewhere. I was like, bro, if I'm comparing him to anybody, it's going to be with you. But in all honesty, there was a lot of similarities to the way that, Brian played the game. Brian was extremely smart, could catch the ball, had phenomenal interior instincts between the tackles, can really do everything. And we see Clyde the same way. You watch him at that level, and what he did as an interior runner for his size was super impressive. He mismatched in the pass game. There'll be a little bit of a learning curve in regards to the pass protection stuff. It's a little bit different at our level, and both the athlete you have to block and potentially the complexity of the scheme. But like Brian, Clyde is extremely smart too. And he's one of the, Adam, you talked about the adjustment period. He's one of the rookies that has caught on really quickly. And that was really exciting for us, where a lot of these guys, especially with the verbiage in our offense and the amount of different calls and checks, again, we're early in the process. And we've only been through a rookie phase here now. We've just kind of started together as a whole group. But you typically know early on, and we've been here for a few weeks, and there's been no setbacks in regards to picking up the playbook. So that is very reminiscent of Brian.
By the way, you can maybe blame me a little for that, Brett, because about 5 minutes after that comparison quote made the rounds on Twitter, I was texting Brian saying, "Hey, did you hear what they're saying about you?"
Adam, he's instigating and then he wants to do a podcast. See how he works?
I know. I've noticed that about him. That's funny.
Brian's one of my favorites of all time. Certainly, I played against Brian at Villanova, and
oh wow.
What a great player he was, but a person, man. Brian is just a great person, super smart, and we're both in the horse race. And after he won the Super Bowl, always joked that we're going to get in on a horse together and try to make it to the Derby one day. So after the Super Bowl, he texted me, "Congrats!" and I think it's time to look into a horse. So certainly the Corona has affected a lot of things. One that being potentially getting into this horse racing thing, but hopefully when things get back to normal, I can connect with Brian and we could do something in the horse racing business.
I just asked one follow-up on DeAndre Washington. I liked coming out of Texas Tech and installing with Raiders training camp for 4 years. How do you think he plays into your rotation there?
Well, I think it's going to be a good battle. And look, at the time, we didn't know Damian was going to decide to opt out. And now that he did, I think that certainly opens up more of an opportunity for DeAndre. I think when we drafted Clyde, I thought, we had a pretty good game plan in regards to being a really good 1-2 punch with Damian and Clyde, and then probably sprinkling in DeAndre Washington and letting the other guys like Darrell Williams compete, and Darwin Thompson, our rookie last year, compete. But I think now, we have a long way to go. There's still a month, and we have to get healthy, and not just in regards to the coronavirus, but hamstring pulls, groin pulls. It's going to be a good battle though, because Darwin Thompson has had a good opening to this camp, and Darrell Williams is a guy that every year just finds a way to help us win games throughout the course of the season. So it'll be a really good competition. I think they're going to push each other, and how the breakdowns will work with carries, I think remains to be seen, because I think it's right now, I think the spot behind Clyde is wide open.
So you're a University of Delaware alum. You're a former Blue Hen, and Brian Westbrook is a Villanova Wildcat. So if you guys went in on a horse, could it be a Wild Hen? Would that be the name? Called Wild Hen?
I don't know. Yeah, no, I have to put some thought into that for sure. That would be fun. That would be fun.
I'm lobbying to be part of this business here, as you can see.
Yeah.
He wants his cut. Yeah.
Let me ask you, Brett, about something Adam and I talk about a lot, and it's the growth of analytics in the NFL, specifically advanced analytics. And I'm wondering how much advanced analytics plays a role in what you do as far as the draft and also free agency, player procurement, and team building.
Well, I think it certainly plays a part, and I think that any time you want to grow and develop in this sport, it's always changing, and it's so dang competitive year in and year out. I mean, it's funny now. It's the time of year when you see people project the team's record and who's going to be at the Super Bowl. And look, the reality of it is there are so many twists and turns that a season could take, and you never really know. I mean, look what the Niners did from a couple years ago to last year, and that's what's great about our sport. The parodies like none other. So with that being said, as an organization, it's your responsibility to just stay ahead of the game, and analytics is a great way to do that. But we incorporate it in all facets and in-game decision-making with Mike Frazier, and then Brent Tillis and Chris Shea, guys that do a lot of our cap research, also are involved with our analytics stuff in regards to our contracts and also our draft process. And we certainly use that a lot in the draft for certain standards that we look for longevity of players, and even into the medical aspect. There are analytics that we use to project players' durability, which is certainly beneficial. And it's scary when you look back at some of the analytic reports, how accurate they've been on some players. So it's a big part of what we do. Certainly will always be rooted in the tape work and the chemistry that we have with the coaching staff to find and identify culture players and players that show it on tape. But certainly analytics has gotten bigger over the years, and it's something that we've embraced and we've tried to get better at and utilize as much as possible.
When you spoke about leadership and impact, how much of an impact for your defense was Tyrann Mathieu last season?
Wouldn't be able to tell you and justify it. It's that big. Special player, and saying special is not giving him enough credit. He's one of those guys that when he steps in the building, he makes the building better, not just the team. He makes the coaches better, the personnel people better, the people that work in our cafeteria better, people at marketing better. Genuine, authentic, and he's a guy that we're very fortunate. We have a lot of great leaders and great players, and certainly Patrick's the face of the NFL, and we have guys like Chris Jones and Frank Clark. But when Tyrann Mathieu stepped into this building, we knew we needed to get better on defense, and we were certainly very fortunate to get Spags, and he brought a fantastic staff here, traded for Frank Clark, did a lot of different things in the draft. But when we got Tyrann in here, he was a game changer in regards to just the culture. I said when we signed him, you can have 11 all-pro defenders, but you're going to need a catalyst to make everything work. And he's the guy that I just call the catalyst. He just makes everything roll.
Now that I think about Tyrann Mathieu's impact, and you guys also drafted, I think, Juan Thornhill last year, right? I believe he played fairly well for you guys. And then to draft a running back in the first round, which is not something typically that we're accustomed to with Andy here in Philadelphia. Are positions changing, or at least the value, Brett, for at least for your organization? Do you look at certain positions differently than maybe you would have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago?
I don't know. I think it changes year to year, and everyone's going to value certainly. I mean, quarterback's a complete outlier, right? So just take that out of the equation. I think when you enter a draft, you're always looking for offensive lineman, defensive lineman, and corners. That's the old handbook to utilize, and everybody uses that, and we're no different. But the draft is different every year, but I think typically year in and year out, you got 10 or 15 players that like every team has in the first round. And then after that, there's a wide variety of how they can come in and make an impact. And it's unique because everyone always kind of, it's cliches, but best player available. But listen, the advantage of picking 32 is not just that you win the Super Bowl, but really just let the player come to you. And we didn't want to force the issue. And we had made trades a couple years ago for Pat, and then we traded for Frank. So we weren't in the trading business. We're in a different mindset now where we won a Super Bowl and we have a young roster. We just need to accumulate picks and accumulate depth on this roster. So we just operate with that mindset to just stick to the board and let the player come to you. And when we got to 32, he was just we felt he was the best player on the board. And listen, now if we have 3 running backs, I mean, yeah, so that could change maybe your mindset. But sometimes when we joke about this in our staff room, the board will tell you which way to go because the way you have it stacked. And we spend so much time watching these guys, and there's so much trust in our room about how we feel about guys. And when we exhaust film work from January up until the draft, we exhaust it so that when the names come off the board's going to tell you what to do, because we've had this conversation over and over from January and February and March and April, May. So, or, you know, when the draft's at the end of April. So once you get to that point, you don't have to worry about changing your mind, because you're just going to let the names fall off. And when we got to our pick last year at 32, I mean, Clyde was the highest guy on the board, and he was a guy that we thought would be a great addition to Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce and Sammy Watkins, and throw a little Clyde Edwards-Helaire in there, and I think, you know, we'll be good. So we're excited about it, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. But it's a long-winded answer to your question. I just think that you just trust the process more than anything. And now, when you're picking 32, the linemen, defensive linemen, offensive linemen, or corners are probably going to be gone. So that's just the way it works, and that's a good problem to have when you're picking 32. But at that point, you just trust the board and take the best player on there.
Yeah, going back to what you said, if I could follow up real quick,
Sure.
You've made a lot of trades, and for some big names, and including trading up to get Patrick Mahomes. As a GM, why are you so aggressive? Where does that come from?
Well, I think it's twofold. I think one, it's because Andy Reid is the head coach here, and you know that if you have a vision for a player and you see talents that are transferable to our game, Andy's going to get out of them. So there's that confidence that, you know, the coaches, there's certainly guys that need more work than others, but you know that if anybody can get it out, and if you believe in a player and what he can be, that 9 times out of 10 Andy Reid and our staff's going to get out of him. And then to double down on that is the staff that I have working with me. I mean, got some great guys. Mike Berganzi, Ryan Poles, Mike Bradway, who used to work for the Eagles, Ryan Nutt, Tim Terry, got really good staff. And when we come to a decision, it's something everybody really feels good about. The process is very deliberate, but when we commit to something, we feel really good about it. And again, throwing in Coach Reid, getting to work with this player, whether it be Pat or Frank Clark, and just knowing that his staff's going to get it out of him, and the culture that we have here, I think we're confident in the process, both from a scouting standpoint and from a player development on the coaching side.
One thing I do want to talk about, you just mentioned some of your personnel guys. I know this varies from building to building, but when you say it's an inclusive process, you know, I know you have dual directors. You've Ryan Poles and Mike Bradway, who you brought in from Philly. I'm not familiar with Poles, but people speak very highly of him. Give us sort of an overview of what Mike and Ryan bring to the table.
Listen, I mean, both guys, extremely bright, organized, intelligent, know the game, played the game. Ryan played at Boston College. Mike was a CAA guy, and I'm certainly partial to those guys. But both guys just have a tremendous work ethic, and we're kind of all wired the same way. Another guy too, Mike Berganzi, who's our director of player personnel. He's a guy that a little smarter. He's an Ivy League guy, so not holding that against him. But he's another guy that I feel like it's one of those unique scenarios where we first met each other, you know, other than Mike here at Kansas City, but it's one of those deals where the first time I stepped in the room with Ryan here at Kansas City and Mike Berganzi and Ryan Nutt, I felt like I've been working with these guys for my whole life because we have the same passions, drives, desires, you know, work ethics, and all these guys are fantastic. And I know that it's only a matter of time before these guys start getting opportunities because they're that talented, and they certainly spoiled me my first 3 years here, going on my 4th as GM, because I've been really surrounded with a ton of talent.
And Brett, I'm so old, I covered Tim Terry as a player. Okay, that's how old I am. Okay, so I remember
Tim's another one, just
a
fantastic person, human being, great scout, great worker. And like I said, I've been very fortunate my entire career going in Philly and having a chance to work with Howdy and Jason Light and Matt Russell and all those guys, Louis Riddick and all those guys coached me up. And then I come here and I get to work with a fantastic staff here. So I've been very blessed to be around some really good people.
Yeah, Brett, your story, you know, is pretty interesting. I mean, for those who don't know, you did a coaching intern, I believe an internship for Andy Reid. And after your time at Delaware, right? Then you went back to Delaware to work in their administrative department, football admin. And then Andy called you back and offered you a job. And I think you remember telling me that, you know, it was a great opportunity, but you also had a pretty good job at Delaware and you weren't sure, but then you eventually took it. And then you turned that into, a rise up into, from coaching assistant to scout and then area scout in the Southeast, which is one of the most fertile areas for college football. So in looking back, I want to ask you what you learned most from your experience being in Philadelphia and in the scouting chain there. And then on top of that, is there a player whose success in Philadelphia while you were there that you were happy for because you remember scouting him and he was not a first or a second round pick? Has anybody come to mind for that?
And, going back to my time in Philly, it was unique setup where when I got in as coach's assistant, most of people at that position at the time, they did kind of just go right into the coaching profession. And when I had gotten in and started to work with coach, he kind of had that dual role where he was both a coach and GM responsibility. So I got introduced to both sides. And then I just had the good fortune of having the opportunity to get in there. And I would say that when I first got started, like anything, you're just so driven and determined to learn as much as you can. I would say, being in an environment where no matter who I was working for at the time, whether it was Howie or Ryan Grigson or Jason Light, these guys, I think the cool aspect with all these guys, they encourage you to be who you are and learn from your mistakes. And I think when young people get in this business, they're so determined to get every evaluation right and to just have a list of right. But the reality of it is, and having been doing this now for quite a while, is it's a process, and that's why communication and collaboration is essential, and realizing that no one has a crystal ball, and there'll be things that'll be outside of everyone's there'll be things outside the spectrum that you just sometimes injuries happen, and sometimes the fit isn't quite what you thought, and it's just an ever evolving process of just learning from your mistakes and just hoping that you're going to always you're not going to hit everything right, and there's going to be losses along the way in regards to your evaluation process. But the goal is to hit more than you miss, and to just continue to learn and surround yourself with great people that will push it. So going back to Philly, you asked about some players, and we joked about this before I got on the podcast. When you're coming up, you want to talk about all the players you hit, but you're really quick to forget the ones you missed, right? I mean, but I think when you get to sit here and in this position now, and you realize that it's just it is a group effort, and I've been fortunate to I think you transition your form of thought from when you're young, you're banging on the table for guys, and when you're older and you've been around, it's fortunate to be a part of the evaluation process, right? And I think when as you mentioned, Jeff, I was fortunate that Howie allowed me to do some different things, and starting out in the Northeast and Midwest, I was able to be part of that with LaShawn and voice my faith in LaShawn McCoy, and then down south, Fletcher Cox. But there was a lot of other people who liked those players and supported them. And so I would say to be a part of that decision-making process was cool, and for those guys to trust my opinions. And again, quick to bring up those, but I'm going to forget the ones that didn't work out and pretend they never happened. Part of the process.
Well, let me ask you, hey, can I ask you a question? We don't need any names, but as this guy who has been scouting so long and also as a player in college, and I remember seeing a practice in Philly, and you're right next to Andy. And it's funny, now I see what you've done. It's pretty amazing. But when you look at some of the misses you've had, was there anything you go, okay, I'm seeing a pattern here. This I have to get better at, just so our people can learn, because we have Chiefs fans listening. What kind of things did you learn about yourself that you were able to correct over the years? You saw, okay, I could get a little bit better than this.
I think that never deviating from the core principles, and I would say, and I would venture to say that most GMs would agree with me that the bigger misses you have, I think you get enamored by maybe some of the physical characteristics, and you pull a little bit away from the character. Anytime a player doesn't work, inevitably the love for football or the embracing of the team concept. Now, listen, I say that with the caveat of I know it's a business, and certainly these guys have to get their money and get their contracts, get that. But I would say that, and that's why your department is so valuable, just understanding the player and how they fit. And cities are different, and locker rooms are different, and the way that coaches, what they expect and how they run their teams are different. So I would say that anytime you really go back and you look at players that just didn't quite work out, more often than not, it was probably less to do with the talent and more to do with the fit, the culture, and the love of the game. So really just – and there's a fine line between that because, there's some guys that you thought weren't going to be a fit or going to have – and they go on to do great things. So it's just kind of tweaking that every year and just getting better at it. And that's where every GM that's had success will tell you, their scouts, their ability to go in there and trust their resources and trust the information they give you is certainly the most important aspect of this department. And that's where I think we've been good because we've got some really good scouts that know how to get information and really understand, again, that continuity, know how Coach Reid's wired, what he expects out of players from training camp, season, during the off season, in the locker room. And so again, I think it's really just knowing the person more than the player.
Brett, it's been a pleasure, man. We really appreciate the time. Thank you for everything. We know how busy you are. We know we're in the heart of training camp here. So honestly, from the bottom of our heart and all from our ITB listeners, we are really grateful for you to come on and talk to us and fill us with this insight. It's great stuff.
Thanks so much, man.
It's great to catch up with you.
Well, listen, I apologize for not getting this having sooner. I'm glad we got it done, and I'll tell you, I look forward to certainly this season. It's going to be challenging, but a lot of fun. And I've also circled some to be determined date because I believe we're at Philadelphia next year, so that should be a lot of fun.
It will definitely be. And we look forward to hopefully getting you on this show again sometime down the road. I know it'll take a little bit, but sometime down the road, we'll have you come back on and join us, man.
Awesome. Anytime, you guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Brett. That's going to do it for this edition of Inside the Birds TV. Thanks to our producer, Hunter Brody. Find his work on his YouTube channel, Sports Talk with Broads, and catch the latest Inside the Birds podcast on any podcast platform you use. And also check out InsideTheBirds.com for our latest Eagles coverage. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next episode of ITB TV.